Welcome to The Behaviorist with Work Wisdom, where we help you adopt high-performance mindsets, behaviors, communication, and culture. I'm your host, Sarah Colantonio. Our intention for the Behaviorist podcast is to share accessible, concrete practices that you can weave into your whole life to begin a shift toward joy and meaningful achievement. Today, we're turning our focus on the Review Club, and we're grateful to have Jaime Arroyo from the Work Wisdom team and Joe McMonagle from Atomic Design joining us. But first, I wanted to provide a little background on the Review. At Work Wisdom, we're all about turning smart behaviors into transformative habits. And over time, Kedron Crosby has been working in the space quite a bit, the founder of Work Wisdom. And one of the things that she's done a lot, and it's had an impact, I think, on me and other ones on the team, has been religiously reading the Harvard Business Journal. So it was in the fall of 2017 when we really saw that our clients wanted to be absorbing many of the best articles in Harvard Business Review for their companies, but they just couldn't find the time. So we decided to start the review because we were reading it anyway, and it would be a nice way to create some social capital for some of our favorite leaders to come together, hear about and discuss the most recent research, best practices being shared in each issue of HBR. And we combined it with local food from our favorite restaurants. Some friend-making opportunities were there too. And so every month, leaders would meet for a week to hear from Work Wisdom experts, eat well, drink coffee, have fun, make some new, often equally ambitious friends. So I thought it might be fun to celebrate the end of our first year with a retrospective on the review here on The Behaviorist. And so, Jaime, I want to ask you first, you've been co-facilitating the review with Matt Swear this year. How did you two decide which articles to dive into each month?
Yeah, so me and Matt both dive into the entire Harvard Business Review and read it from cover to cover. And we want to make sure that we pick articles that incorporate the Work Wisdom themes and the things that Work Wisdom is about. So whether it's high-performing mindsets, culture shaping, or communications, we want to make sure we pick articles that reflect those different themes. So we pick a few, we go back and forth and talk about how we can incorporate these themes into them and how we can discuss and what are some key values that we can pull out of the articles to be able to share with the rest of the leaders in the group.
So that's really cool. So Joe, you've been in the Review Club, and we're really grateful that you've been in the review. So not only are you a diligent reader of the articles, but you have been applying the stuff you've learned into your work at Atomic. So can you first tell us a little bit about your role at Atomic and how long you've been there, what Atomic does?
Sure. So my title is the Vice President of Set Construction at Atomic, and Atomic Design is a company focused on live event and experience environments. We focus mostly on entertainment and brand communication, so we play in that space where we create places and experiences for people to connect with each other and connect with brands and connect with entertainment. So in my role, I manage the set construction department, so we fabricate custom scenery for any kind of event that one could want. And I've been there for 10 years. I think I mentioned that part already.
Okay.
And that's what I do.
Okay, so Atomic is part of this sort of Rockstar Lidditz thing that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah, Rock Lidditz.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back to the review. Jaime, first I wanted to ask you, has there been an article that's really resonated with you this year?
Yeah, probably one of the ones that had the most impact on me was actually, I forget the exact title, but it was on how CEOs manage their time. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to be an article that resonated with the entire group because whether we're in leadership positions or aspiring to be leaders, all of us want to know how we can manage the most important asset that we have, and that's time. So seeing how some of the top performers around the world in different organizations do that was very enlightening. It gave us a lot of tips that we can actually take back to our organizations and implement. So I think that was the one that had the most impact on me, and seeing the response from the group, a lot of folks took a lot of tactical ideas away from that article.
I feel like I wish I would have been in hearing what people were talking about in that meeting. What about you, Joe? What was the one article that...
It's funny you mentioned that one, Jaime, because that wasn't the one that came to mind when I was thinking about this, but that was a very impactful one. like most people, I struggle with that aspect of too much to do and not enough time.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? So there was a couple that day, I believe, that were focused on time management. And those are great conversations, great articles, and then great conversations with the rest of the team there. The one that I remembered, though, was, I believe, called Structure That's Not Stifling. And it was a story, it was a few stories. One was about Alaskan Airlines and the way that it had changed its sort of strategic priorities over the course of maybe 10 years or so, and the different impacts that their strategic focus had on their business. And basically what I recall was an evolution from lack of structure and sort of tribal knowledge. And then as the company grew, the failure of that approach, because there was new people and all this growth and people didn't have that sort of baked in tribal knowledge. And then they moved to a more intentional sort of transmission of values and training focus to allow new people to carry the torch, if you will, from those who had been there for so long. So at Atomic, we are growing quickly and challenged with this growth from a core group of folks who have been there for a long time and really speak and breathe the Atomic values to a company with a lot of growth and a lot of new employees, and struggling with that transition from again, tribal knowledge into more intentional, structured transmission of this information in a company that really values creativity and being nimble and reactive to and responsive to the market, which is always very, very fast paced in our industry. So the friction between structure and the ability to be nimble is a real one at Atomic. And so this article really spoke to that and how to develop and how to consider structure, not in a limiting way, but in a really empowering way to the employees. It's really cool.
Nice. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's a good one. I recommend it.
So sometimes the sharing from the members is even better than from what you learn from HBR. Have there been any lessons that you learned from other members of the review that's influenced how you lead yourself or your team? So I'm going to start with you, Joe. What do you think?
So I don't recall a particular piece of insight, but I can say that as a whole, the practice of being a part of the review is in itself and has had an impact on me. Transitioning from a person at Atomic who was doing the work of Atomic, very consistently, very in the activity of the company, to one transitioning into a leadership role, has given me is challenging. My muscle memory is in the execution of what we do, and so getting my headspace into a more strategic focus has been something that I've been trying to be intentional about, and this Work Wisdom Review Club has really given me that chance and really actually held me accountable to that task by committing to reading these articles, committing to preparing my thoughts on these sort of bigger picture conversations. And then in those groups, hearing the responses of different, really disparate leadership in that group. Some manage lots of people, some own and operate very, very small companies, some are somewhere in between. So I would say just the being open to the different input and the influence from the different membership of this group is the thing that I've taken away the most.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that. I think hearing the responses from everyone in the group has been very enlightening. So the cool thing about the review is that everyone there is an expert in their own right. So when we have the specific theme or topic brought up in article, everyone's able to share their own experience from their own organization and what their thoughts are on specific concepts. So I think hearing each one talk about, well, how this applied to me or an experience where this situation came up helps the entire group. And it's been very cool to hear from each and every member specific situations that apply to the articles.
So is it true that it's people from different industries? It's not like everybody in the music structure
entertainment world.
Okay.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's really diverse in that sense, and in terms of what are the people who are there, what their companies do. And actually, I'll maybe add to my comment. There was one particular thing that I really picked up. There was a woman in our group who was talking about her experiences in leadership and her experience with implicit bias in the workplace. And it's not something I've never heard of before, and it's not something that I've never thought about before, but the way she presented her story and her stories really made me question the way I behave in the workplace with myself, with my team. And that was something, again, that I work with other women. There are women leaders in my company. This was just more information and more concrete examples of things to be sensitive to and aware of and focus on. So that was impactful, for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a cool opportunity when you get out of the workspace and still be able to talk about things, but it's a nice safe place to kind of learn new concepts and just hear other people's experiences that you normally wouldn't get to hear about. So it's cool.
And because we're such a diverse group, there's, I think, a less likelihood of the sort of groupthink that comes with when you're in the same culture and you're in the same, you hear the same values being stated or the same challenges, you know, relatively consistently. We all come with our own unique baggage and attempts to shed that. So it kind of frees up information to get into your brain in a different way than it normally would, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that. I like the idea of being able to learn from all these different leaders and across different industries, and it must feel good. It's not like a competition. It's just learning. You know, it's the same human problems, but you don't have to worry about that business stuff that could get in the way. So we might have skipped ahead a little bit by talking about this, but the next question, I'll start with you, Jaime. What's the best thing about the review in your mind?
Yeah, so my favorite part is being around other leaders in different industries. So, you know, me and Matt aren't trying to teach anything during this conversation. It's really just that how do you facilitate discussion among other business leaders? How do you start to bring out conversation and you know, their experiences and their credibility? Like, how do you bring that out into the group so they can learn from each other? Because they're not going to learn from us. So we really
question that.
Yeah. So we really use these articles as a tool to just get them to talk with each other. And I think that's where the magic happens when you get to hear from someone else that's in a different industry, a different, you know, different position, whatever it might be. I think that's the best part of it.
What about you?
Well, actually, not to argue the point, Jimmy, but one of my favorite parts is the leadership in the group, and the moderators bring such an incredible grasp of the topic and the subject matter. Whether it was Kedrin or Matt or yourself, Jaime, there's just a wealth of knowledge there and a wealth of exposure to reading and other experiences that I don't have, you know, as my growth to leadership has been relatively homegrown and, you know, inside one channel. I'm keenly aware of how much I don't know, and I'm getting more and more exposure to that. And so this club has really forced me to come to terms with that and to step away from what I would consider my gut instincts as the best possible answer and think, you know, other people have done this before and been challenged by this before and worked their way through this before and maybe even written a book about this before. So exposure to that level of critical thinking on topics that I find myself trying to deal with in the moment with what I already know or have already experienced, it really sheds some light into that process and shows that there's a better way. So I really appreciated that.
I think you guys are being pretty humble about your abilities, but that sounds great. I love it. So here's another question. I'm going to start with you, Jaime. Who do you think is a good fit for joining the review? We're coming up onto the new year and a new review club. So what do you say?
Yeah, I think pretty simply, a lot of leaders within organizations are an obvious good fit for the review, but also aspiring leaders. So folks that are in the pipeline to be, you know, take on a management role or take on an executive role. This is a great opportunity for someone to join, learn from other leaders, and really get an kind of firsthand experience of what others are going through, so they can learn from them as they're preparing themselves for the next step. So I think those types are a good fit for the review.
Yeah, I think that's a natural place to be. I even think, regardless of your organizational status, people who either have a mindset that's open to this kind of conversation or want that or recognize the need for that, even if you're not a leader, what we're talking about often is not simply like how to manage better, or it's really how to have an impact and how to be empathetic to other human beings in your workplace, in whatever it is you're doing. And those are skills and perspectives that all of us need. So I agree, it's really good. And even in the side of Atomic, when we talk about who should join this group, I'm thinking about leadership and leadership pipeline, but it's wider than that. It's really anyone who's willing to step into a pretty safe space and have a conversation that might challenge their gut instincts and their preconceived notions about the right way to do things.
Yeah, I think the amazing thing is a lot of these concepts aren't just how to be a better leader or manager. It's like, how do you become a better human being?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So that's the amazing part of
That's
like
what I love
learning
about
these
it.
things. Yeah.
I think there's actually, it's an HBR article that's about organizations and how leadership comes from all levels of the organization, how the best organizations kind of have that in it. And so, I guess it could come from anybody who wants to be a better person. So has there been any one lesson learned that has changed your own behavior?
It's a loaded question, Sarah. I think pertaining to an article specifically that I connected with a lot was one on organizational grit. It talked a lot about the strength of character that someone has and how that actually helps someone succeed in the workplace more than intelligence or position, whatever it might be. While those things are important, grit is the one thing that was able to get people over the finish line. So that was something that connected to me pretty, that I was able to take with me. And I noticed throughout the conversation, a lot of folks connected with that as well. So,
okay.
For me, I mean, I hate to repeat myself, but just the practice of being in this group was one of the biggest takeaways for me, making myself prepare for it, carving out space, and not just carving it out, but believing that it was the best use of my time to carve out space from the operational expectations and duties that I might carry to step into the strategic space and try to learn and become a better leader and have a more impactful leader in my company. That muscle memory has taken, I won't say it's finished, has taken some effort and energy and some work. So that has been huge. I remember one article or one specific sort of tool that we discussed in the group. It was about brainstorming with questions instead of answers. So the idea of we're going to propose a challenge and bring people together, and nobody can suggest a solution. All that you can do is ask a question with no caveats, no setting up the question. All you can do is bring questions. And so whoever is proposing this question or this problem records those questions and reviews those to try to make sure we're not missing an angle to this problem, before we try to solve it as quickly as possible.
I love that.
It was really cool. And so we actually, my colleague Chloe and I, who was a part of the group as well, took that back and we applied it in an instance. We've been dealing with one challenge that hadn't gone away. And so we thought, let's try this. And we brought in a really disparate group of people who had no skin in the game, some people who did have skin in the game, and again, just kind of described the problem. We had 2 minutes, and we just kind of furiously wrote down things that people were asking. And it was a really interesting experience and experiment, really. Brought some light to the thing that we had not considered.
Does it take pressure off if you don't have to solve it in that session? You just have to come up with questions.
It certainly does that. It also eliminates the likelihood that the first thing that someone says is the one that we all latch onto, because it has the most time for us to talk about, and the last thing that someone says before the meeting's over gets kind of scooted away because we ran out of time to talk about that one, and the person with the loudest voice in the room gets to take the mic for the longest. All those things that are normal challenges to the groupthink concept, we try to. This approach at least tries to chop that away. So it was really cool.
How could our listeners replicate the review in their own cities? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as picking up a copy of the HBR and getting a group of, whether it's your coworkers or folks in other industries, friends, and really taking some time, as Joey mentioned, to carve out some space and talk about the articles, talk about the lessons learned. So I think anyone can do that. I think that's the beauty of it. It's something that is accessible to a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you were to share your topic list and the articles you picked out, because there seems to be like a focus to the articles you pick out and identify that theme, that could be a thing that could be shared with the world. I also have to say I'd love to have a call-in show because I've always wanted to say first-time caller, a long-time listener, and I thought that was going to be my chance in this podcast.
No, we made you come.
I know, I'm here and I don't get to say it. So I'd love a chance to say that in general, but I also think it'd be kind of cool to have some conversation because the thing, again, the articles are great and the facilitation is really impactful, but the conversations that happen around it and the people that are there just bringing their own experience and their own life perspective to these things is really what I find to be super valuable.
So normally it's 2 hours, is that right? And how many articles do you and Matt decide on?
We usually have about 5 to 6 total. Okay. There's usually 2 or 3 warm-up articles, we call them, that are very short, where we kind of start off to kind of kick off the conversation, and then about 2 or 3 longer articles that are a little bit more in-depth, and we spend a little bit more time on analyzing.
Okay.
And I can say, in preparation for these meetings, it's like a half an hour of reading if you were to sit down and do it. It's not an incredible amount of work. If you really just carved out a half an hour time, you could
Okay.
read through this.
All right, it's not major homework.
No,
or anything.
it's-
Okay.
Yeah. And you can do it, the morning of the meeting. So I've been told.
Okay. So thank you both for coming and talking about this. I haven't been able to do more than bring in the food for the review.
It's been delicious.
And so
Thank
that's
you.
good. I cooked it myself. That's not true. But it's so great to hear about the sort of logistics and the experience of it. And overall, just, Kedron and I and the team at Work Wisdom, we're just grateful to you, Joe, for being part of the movement. Jaime, it's so wonderful to have you on the team. And so those of you that are listening, thank you for downloading The Behaviorist. We hope you'll subscribe. And please stream our upcoming podcast that's going to be all about equity in the workplace. And also, just if you're listening, reach out to us through our website, workwisdom.com. You can enjoy Work Wisdom press and productions. You can ask questions, or please give us suggestions for topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Thank you so much for listening.